Hi, Charles SirBookSage here with a Saturday edition of Friday Reads. I was in a reading slump recently, and in my last video I talked about how going to anything Tolkien gets me out of the reading slump. So I read Children of Hurin. And normally I'd then go back to reading what I was regularly reading before that. But this time instead, I ended up starting a reread of The Lord of the Rings. So I'm still early on in the Fellowship of the Ring. I think they just left Farmer Maggot's house, so still have a ways to go even before they get to Crick Hollow. And it's been at least 5 years since I last did a read-through of The Lord of the Rings, so I'm more than overdue anyway. But that's not the only thing I'm going to be reading this weekend. That's just going to be a nice, slow, leisurely, ongoing read of that trilogy. I am, primary reading-wise, though, I'm going to be rereading two old science fiction books that are among the earliest science fiction books I ever read in science fiction as a genre. And there's this book. I actually picked up the audiobook from Andre Norton, and let me just take a quick look here. The audiobook is called Star Soldiers, and it contains two of her early science fiction novels from the 50s, Star Guard and Star Rangers. And I think Star Rangers is also in some of its publications called The Last Planet, I think. I'm pretty sure my print from the 70s, I think calls it The Last Planet, but I can't be sure. Anyway, Andre Norton is actually the reason I started reading science fiction, because my reading went from, young child versions of just childhood stories, and then children's versions of Greco-Roman stuff, and then Arthurian. But then my uncle, Barry, brought the family the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which I read after my older brother read them. So I read those when I was in elementary school. And then that led me down the fantasy road, which led me to Andre Norton and her Witchworld series, which starts off as kind of like a portal fantasy, where someone from our world is drawn into this fantastical world. And through starting to devour her Witchworld books, I noticed she had all these science fiction stories. And I believe Star Rangers, though again mine was called The Last Planet, I think, was the first one of the ones that I read. And that is what got me into science fiction. So I devoured as many Andre Norton books as I could, and then moved on to Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Zelazny, and that whole genre. Andre Norton's sci-fi books are the reason why I was so excited to go see the first Star Wars film. Because my older brother and I were, I think, the way I remember it, we were in a theater in New Dorp, in Staten Island, watching, I think, a Pink Panther movie. It might have been. And they had a couple of trailers the week before the movie started, and one of them was the very first trailer for Star Wars. And I remember the whole theater laughed. They thought it was silly and ridiculous looking. And me and my brother looked at each other and were like, this looks amazing. We got to keep an eye out. Find out whenever this is going to come out, we got to go opening day, which is what we ended up doing. I think we saw the second showing of Star Wars on its opening day, probably in the Highland, cinema over on Highland Boulevard near New Dorp. Because we used to live in Tottenville and take the train all the way up to New Dorp, which is where the movie theaters were that we would go to. So Andre Norton is the main reason why I'm a big science fiction fan. So I'm really looking forward to diving back into these two books. Now, Star Rangers came out in 53 and then Star Guard in 55. On the timeline of her science fiction, sort of world she built, the events of Star Guard take place first. Star Guard deals with a galaxy where humans are only able to have interstellar travel if they agree to be mercenaries for all these aliens. Otherwise, they're not allowed to get out and travel and participate in the galaxy. And this story is about this one particular human mercenary, and his team, who are betrayed and stranded on this hostile planet by their alien masters. And it's them marching across this planet trying to get to a place on it that they can get out of there. And I haven't read this book probably since I don't know, since the early 70s, mid 70s, most likely. It's been a long, long time. but really, really cool. And takes place at the beginning of what would become this like galactic civilization. And the Star Rangers takes place 4,000 years after that book, where this galactic civilization is now collapsing, and everything's like breaking down civilization. And we follow this exploratory vessel of these Star Rangers who end up being forcibly having to land on this uncharted planet that's like not on any of the maps and no one knows anything about. But when they get there and they arrive on it, there's just something about it that seems just very familiar, like they feel like they should know this place. And it's that journey they go through, and hostility things and fights and all sorts of stuff that they go through until they discover like this planet and what its importance is. And again, I haven't read this one since probably late 70s, early 80s, I think was the last time I reread this one. It's just been so long ago. So yeah, so some Fellowship of the Ring. We haven't gotten to, I think Pippin is still not part of the group yet. It's just Frodo, Sam, and Merry at this point. It's always a pleasure reading Tolkien's works. And I think I wanted to do this reread of Lord of the Rings before I dive back into mostly the Second Age stuff before, in the lead up to the Rings of Power TV show that's coming out in September. But anyway, yeah, so just going back to the well with some really old school, like original, like foundational reading stories for me as a kid in terms of becoming fans of these genres. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to be concentrating on. And I think I'm probably going to live stream tomorrow night, Sunday night, which would be Sunday the 19th. I'm not sure the exact time yet, maybe somewhere around, maybe 9:30, somewhere between 9 and 10, I'm going to live stream. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet. I'll probably talk a little bit about the reading I've done in these books between now and then. But I'm also thinking about like diving into like story adaptations, and in particular like my thoughts on some of the Disney Plus Marvel TV shows and what I think about their adaptations. Because I love the new Miss Marvel show. I'm not its target audience particularly, but I think it's a really well done, well put together, and well presented the show. I love the unique sort of with all the emojis and everything, like in the neon lights and signs in the stores. Really, really well put together. So I'm looking forward to that story continuing. But yeah, so I'm just going to kind of talk about like some of the reading and some of just story adaptations and what I think of when they're done well and when they're done poorly. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for this Friday Reads video, Saturday edition. And let me know in the comments if you're reading anything in particular this weekend. I really do need to get back to the very long book series I'm in the middle of. For those who may not be aware, Malazan, Walt Longmire, Harry Bosch, Honor Harrington, and I do have to get back to the Dresden Files at some point. I've kind of put that one on hold because I've got like 4 different, like 16 plus book series I'm in the middle of. But I really need to get back to them. But let me this blast from the past, going back to like my old school well stuff. And then it'll be back to my regular reading. Cool. Yeah, this was, I feel like out of practice a bit filming some of these videos, but it is what it is. Hi, I'm Charles, this is SirBookSage. Happy reading.